Hey guys, before we start this video, I want to just take a moment and address some of the themes in this game. They are in no means a joke and shouldn't be taken lightly. I will be talking about things that can come from severe depression and from someone taking advantage of people in more ways than one. So with that said, I will address when necessary, but I won't spend too much time on them, okay? Okay, so if you're ready, let's start the episode. Moving on with horror games, I decided to go back to my roots of platformers, and I have had this little game on my shelf since 2011 or 2012. My lovely artist Lady Locks here, who makes all my awesome thumbnails when she gets the chance, told me about this game back in high school, and I was interested in seeing a darker, more twisted version of Alice in Wonderland. You know, after we got Tim Burton's version of Alice. Well, when I bought this used copy, it came with a code to play the first game, and luckily for me, it wasn't used, and this one came out 10 whole years before Burton made his version. Suck it, Tim.
You're not my Alice.
It really is an interesting series, a world without rhyme or reason, rules without meaning, the absurdity being the norm. While I did finish the first outing with American McGee's Alice, which was originally a PC title, it was added on with this version's Alice Madness Returns. I remember playing the second game up until, I guess right before the first chapter is about to end, but I never picked it back up. I remember I tried playing on the hardest difficulty because I was a trophy whore at the time, but now I can just enjoy a game for what it is since I have the highest level among all my PlayStation friends, so I can just enjoy this game for what it is, a dark telling of Alice in Wonderland. Now what's interesting about this series is that American McGee made it so you can play any game in any order and it won't spoil the previous games. I say that because he is currently crowdfunding over on Patreon for a third game called Alice Asylum, which if funded correctly says that it could come out on Halloween 2021. So if you like what you see, go check that out. I'll put a link in the description down below. Apparently he had no issues with getting the licensing for it since EA owns parts of it. So that's good, all things considering with EA right now. Curiouser and curiouser. As much as I do love 3D platformer collectibles, I wonder why I never went back and finished this game. So I have the PS3 copy of this, which is the one I'm going to look at for this review. I'm also going to look at the first game as well as kind of a double feature, mostly because if I remember right, the first game goes by pretty quick without a whole lot of story, where the sequel has a lot of story, not unlike the Portal games. But I'll mostly be focusing on the second game than the first, and we'll see why. Well, let's peer through the looking glass with American McGee's Alice and Alice the Madness Returns. So the game takes place in an insane asylum, apparently after Lewis Carroll's story through the looking glass and what Alice found. I have never read Lewis Carroll's work, I know I'm terrible, but the good folks over at Disney made an animated adaptation and I have seen that, and supposedly it includes the first and second book in the movie, and it is the only Disney movie where we follow a young Alice. So if I'm getting this right, this is what the game is telling me.
Oh, well, come along, it's time for tea.
Beautiful. So apparently at the age of 7, Alice's family died in a house fire and turned her into a loony, and she was sent to an insane asylum for 10 years, around 1874. She slowly began showing signs of recovery when she ventures into Wonderland to put her mind back in order, but instead of sunshine and flowers, it's twisted in a deadly version of its former self. You meet familiar characters like the Cheshire Cat, who acts as your guide throughout these games, the Mad Hatter, the White Rabbit, Tweedledum and Tweedledee, and all while trying to track down the Queen of Hearts and the Jabberwocky. The story works for what it is. Alice saw something traumatizing, she goes to a safe haven that is warped by her mental state, and tries to fix it and become the world's champion. Afterwards, you leave the asylum after the Dr. Wilson gives you a discharge, and Alice and her nurse finds her a job at House Ditch's home for wayward youth, which leads into the next game. There really isn't a lot to go over here, kind of like in the first Portal game. Like, the first game has a small story, but it's more about the moment-to-moment gameplay, and the gameplay itself, which I'll get to after we talk about the meat of this video, Madness Returns. So the game follows 1 year after the last one and follows a 19-year-old Alice working at a wayward home after being released from Routledge Asylum under the care of psychiatrist Dr. Angus Bumby, being referred to by her former alcoholic nurse, Pris Witless, who was trying to keep her off the streets from being a whore. Yeah, I didn't see whores coming, did you now, Tim? She works there essentially as the doctor's assistant, helping the orphans and whatnot, but the doctor is also helping her keep her sane by telling her to forget the memories of her past and not to remember the fire that killed her parents and older sister, which I don't think was really addressed, but let's move on. but she's still dealing with the mental issues, PTSD, survivor's guilt, among other things. Wonderland no longer there for her. After a session with a doctor, he sends her for medicine, where she gets sidetracked following a small cat. She runs across her old nurse, who is blackmailing Alice to buy her alcohol for the confession she made in the insane asylum about killing her family, to keep her from reporting it to the police. Alice is curious as to the whereabouts of her rabbit, one of the only things to survive the fire of her family's home. After seeing Witless turn into the Jabberwock, she has a mental breakdown and goes back into Wonderland, looking a lot more peaceful than in the first game. Here she runs across the Cheshire Cat once again, where he says that Alice's mental state is a problem and that Wonderland has a new ruler, and that her sanity is at risk once again. She seeks out the Mad Hatter, who is in pieces, and asks Alice to put him back together, and she agrees if he would tell her about the source of the corruption of Wonderland. After putting him back together and breaking into the Mad Hatter's factory that the Dormouse and March Hare have taken over, they see the source of the madness, this infernal train that is heading towards Wonderland. After a cop-out of a boss fight, the factory starts to fall apart, and Alice asks the Mad Hatter for more information. But he ignores her, only wanting another tea party, holding his dead friends as the factory falls on him. Alice then drowns in the Sea of Tears and wakes up in the real world with two fishermen that were going to take advantage of her and renting a bed at the Mangled Mermaid, which is where Alice heads to next after telling them off because Nan Sharpies, Alice's former nanny, runs the whorehouse. After running with a pimp at the brothel, she tells him to leave her old nanny alone, and he punches Alice's out and he sets the brothel on fire as Alice goes again into Wonderland. Alice comes across the Mock Turtle, the former Looking Glasses Railway, as the captain of a ship. Alice asks him about the train, but he is too scared after being replaced as station master and gives a ticket instead to the Carpenter show, telling her to go see it. He then has her do errands for him to get the show ready, only to betray her and leave her for dead in a ghost-filled cemetery. She then goes to confront them. As the show starts, the walrus starts to eat the oysters and the patrons. Alice gets angry with the Carpenter, but turns it around on her, saying that the train is partially her fault and someone is misleading her, and is to seek out the caterpillar. Alice awakened once again with her former nanny asking about the Little Fire, when she is unwilling to talk and sends her to the family lawyer, Wilton J. Radcliffe, to collect her rabbit. He was telling her about the report about how the cat had set the house on fire by knocking over a lantern and the gas heating the house caused it to ignite. But when the lawyer starts to question her role in the fire, she has another nervous breakdown and goes into Wonderland once again, where the caterpillar surrounds her in smoke and she shrinks down to a small size going through the caterpillar's domain. It's here where she has a flashback about the house fire and thinks about how Dinah was in her room that night of the fire and that the only oil lamp was being used upstairs as a nightlight. She reaches the caterpillar in a cocoon state and Alice tells him that she's worried that she can't save Wonderland if she can't save herself, which he responds by telling her that doing so is one and the same, to seek out what is left of the Queen of Hearts, referring to her as someone she once knew and loved. Alice awakens in jail, or gaol, where the police brought her in after she was being hysterical fit in the middle of the street. No moments after she is released, she goes into another episode and re-enters Wonderland. So I'm just gonna put this up. I'm gonna be talking about the ending and twist as well as some sensitive subjects I mentioned at the top of the episode. So if you don't want that spoiled or you don't want to hear about it, go ahead and skip to this point, okay? Okay. Alice comes across the ruins of her previous outing through Queensland, where she finds the White King and states that after Alice left, the Queen took over and imprisoned him. He also mentions she has to destroy him to move forward, but before she takes out the King, he warns her of the Queen's executioner. This thing is terrifying. Up until now, the enemies had been par from the course, usually a rhythm or strategy to beat this thing. All you can do is run away and it'll show up and kill you in one hit, and you can't do anything, and if you try, he'll laugh at you. Wait, I'm talking about a horror-type game, and this is the first time I mentioned the game being scary. Well, the intended audience is anyone over 18 if the box is to go by, but since I've been cursed out by prepubescent children online on GTA Online, I'm sure any interested youth found some way to pick this game up. That being said, if you've seen any slasher film or played anything like the Silent Hill series or Resident Evil, if those scare you, then this probably won't be any more creepy than anything else you have already come across. This scene, though. That was really satisfying, to be honest. After Alice searches for the Queen, she figures out that her sister was dead, but unburnt, and had been murdered by the real arsonist.
It's only a flesh wound.
There it is. When Alice reaches the castle, the queen bears a striking resemblance of a younger Alice, angrily yells at her about letting this train run amok, destroying Wonderland, and surrounds her with tentacles, consuming her, sending her into a nightmare. She sees a vision of Dr. Wilson and Nurse Cratchit. Alice went on a surreal walk through Rutledge and had been incarcerated, but it's just another hallucination mixed with her memories, growing up there as a child. She sees visions in this distorted hallucination with Tweedledee and Tweedledum and the orderlies, before entering the waiting room where Bumbly, Nan Sharp, Nurse Witless, and Mr. Radcliffe tell Alice either to forget about the fire or go back to the asylum. She breaks free from the hallucination and finds herself coming across a dying child, begging Alice to help the other children. Alice doesn't understand what danger there was because the Queen of Hearts was no longer a threat, which apparently is representative of the abused children at the orphanage, that she didn't recognize the abuse happening there. And as Alice finds out that the parts are being taken from the children thanks to the doll maker. Also, these kids, for real. No, the dolls, man, these kids. No, I play this late at night and man, this is nightmare fuel. But as Alice makes her way to the mastermind of the infernal train, the Ruin, and the black goop monsters, the doll maker, it's here that Alice figures out that the night of the fire, the arsonist was Dr. Bumby. He bragged about what he did. The doll maker captures Alice and makes her into a doll, but she's able to break out of this almost immediately. As Alice confronts the real Bumby at the train station, calling him out for his misdeeds, the taking innocence of the children, the murder of her family to cover up the fact that he had forced himself on her sister, killed her, and set the house on fire to conceal the evidence. He confirms this and almost brags about how he turned the children into his care into prostitutes, and that he was trying to turn Alice into a mindless sex slave, but she was too stubborn and powerful, that Alice was beauty and was mad like her sister, and, quote, claiming Lizzie was a tease who pretended to despise him, and that she got what she wanted in the end. She tells him that he will pay for his crimes, and he responds with, who would believe her? She's a former lunatic, and he is a well-respected man in the community. Alice fights the doll maker in her mind and takes the key to her sister's door that Bumby had on him like a trophy, then pushes him into an oncoming train, walks away, leaving the train station, and sees her Wonderland is restored, ending Alice Madness Returns. Well, that was interesting for sure. I knew about the story for quite some time, so the reveal ending wasn't a huge surprise to me, but the moment-to-moment segments were interesting enough and very engaging. So let me address the first game real quick. This is an early 2000s computer game, way before things like Steam and the such. To give you an idea, Spyro 1 came out around the same time. The first 3 Crash Bandicoot games had already came out, so I can give it some leeway, but the platforming is really archaic. You move forward with the left analog stick and strafe almost like tank controls, but it's not really tank controls. You have a blue reticle and whatnot. It moves the camera all willy-nilly. You can make some precision jumping if you aim the reticle and see it change to footprints. She will also auto jump to that spot. The game has no lives. If you die, you go back to the last save, and any health you had at that point will stay at that point. It does have auto saving, but that's the same issue. The game has a multitude of weapons, but the fighting mechanics are also clunky, and you can find yourself falling into pits easy and just game over. So I can't really recommend this game, to be honest. Unless you are really interested, just know what you're going in for when you hop in. But let's go ahead and talk about the real meat of this, the Madness Returns. One thing I wanted to bring up that I had to do for this review was I had to wipe my old save file to start a new one, which was odd, meaning you only have one save per file, and no option to start over from the main menu, only continue. But the first game had multiple save slots. Why the need to go backwards? Whatever, it's fine. After you beat the game, you can revisit them in any order, so I guess it's unneeded. Just thought it was an interesting thing to mention. I mean, there's a New Game Plus mode where you can keep everything, and what's also cool is that there's also a bunch of different outfits that you can set for Alice, as well as alternate weapons and such like that. It's nice for a multiple playthrough and can, change up the gameplay style. So the game is actually a very linear collectible platformer, but that's not all it has. Between the platforming sections, there are fighting sections, shooting sections, sliding sections, the ship shooting sections, the battle royale sections, answering questions, music timing sections, sliding block puzzles, 2D platformers, logic puzzles, kaiju mode, monkey ball type minigame. This game has a maddening amount of different gameplay styles, and it feels all packed in. But I will say that none of them really overstay their welcome. Well, sliding puzzles, these right here. You have to go collect the missing pieces, and they all play out the same way. Find 2 in one room, find another one hidden behind a concealed keyhole, and kill all the enemies to get across the pieces that you have to do the puzzle. Granted, at least the game gives you the option to skip them, But I'm a big boy. I went to school. I can do a puzzle, man. So one of the things is that it's kind of hard to figure out where is progression and where's the collectible. Like, you can go what seems like the off-beaten path to get one of these games' many collectibles, and sometimes it's actually progression, and the game will close off the path behind you, meaning you are going to have to come back later, which is fine, I guess. There is a lot of different collectibles. There are memory fragments that will unlock a bit of backstory and memories based on the main characters in the game. There are pig snouts you have to listen out for and pepper them, reward you with a goodie like teeth, which can be used to upgrade your weapons. Never thought I'd say that. And Alice bottles, which vary from blue to gold. Blue will unlock character profiles based on the chapter, and gold will unlock concept art. The game is very buggy at times, and can notice models loading in. In fact, when I reached the game crashed right before a section was supposed to load in. There's also multiple instances of the game stopping to load up a section. Control-wise, it's definitely a lot better than the first, for sure. Moving Alice feels nice. She has more weight in the first game, but I find myself wrestling with the camera to get a proper angle at times, and Alice feels like she takes up the whole screen. You have a triple jump for distance, but not for height, and they also give you this glide mode, giving Alice a very floaty feel. She can also jump from the glide. There are times where I feel like I will overshoot the platform because of how much distance she can get, although she doesn't have a ledge grab, which she had the first game, but she only had one jump, I guess. With this moveset, if I miss, it's my fault. She's not gonna have a grab, so. There's also a shrink mechanic. You can't jump and her movement is about half. It's not unlike Batman's detective mode if I have to compare it to anything. The game will show secret door holes for extra goodies to collect and will push you into the proper direction. There are also these flowers that you can get in that will regain your health. They can also reveal hidden pathways and stuff that you would be able to see unless you were small, and they become invisible for a short amount of time, and then you have to turn small again to make them visible again. Fighting-wise, you have a few different weapons at your disposal, but fighting usually is done in the same as Ocarina of Time. You lock onto an enemy and swing. You can cycle through enemies and they can grab you, you can dodge or shrink out of it. Weapons can be upgraded, like I said before, by talking to the skull on Alice's apron, and by giving it teeth that you collect will upgrade them to make them more useful. It makes sense if you don't think about it. So, you have your default weapon, the Vorpal Blade, which is quick and is used for close range. The Pepper Grinder, which is also being used for puzzle solving, is also used to attack enemies from afar, which sometimes coming across an enemy who seems intimidating with their melee weapon, but literally with a fully upgraded peppercorn, it's like using a lance against a Chicago typewriter. There really is no contest. There's also an umbrella, which I mostly use to break enemy shields that require this counter, and that's because Alice's dodge is stupid broken. Most difficult fight, tap into your inner Fox McClown and shine on them so they can't hit you. There's the hobby horse that does so much damage and breaks enemy blocks and can finish down enemies. It's also used for breaking certain walls and floors. The clockwork bomb that is mostly used for time puzzle elements is also used in battle as kind of an explodey decoy, which is nice and can also break enemy barriers. I find myself dropping these mostly accidentally in a fight. Finally, a teapot cannon that, no pun intended, does range splash damage on enemies and can also be used to break far away walls and items. Honestly, it's nice to see that these weapons have more than just a battle use. They are also used for progression and puzzle solving, making them not feel unneeded like in other platformers that may have one or two uses. Most of the enemies are kind of pushed over with these wide range of movesets, and there really is no boss encounters except the final boss, but the first game was like that too, so it's consistent at least. Like I mentioned before, I say that the scariest enemy in this entire game is the Queen's Executioner. It cannot die, it kills you in one shot, so you have to do nothing but run away. You have to bait it and keep killing the other zombie cards until you can get the away from it. It keeps showing up too in regular fights too and gives you a bit of an anxiety. Speaking of creepy and scary enemies, these enemies, this big baby doll thing that's the hardest enemy so far, you have to break its clothes off and attack its pins on the back and what the fuck, baby? No, I'm sorry. Any level of creepiness or scariness right out the window with a name like Baby. Oh man, I needed that. The music, it's okay. Nothing I could pick out and not very memorable, very atmospheric for sure. When the game gets frustrating, it's okay, because any death in a pit usually puts you back to where you last fell, and any game overs restart you by a pretty close checkpoint, so the game only really stops when you do, so there's that. I don't know what turned me off for revisiting the second game, made me look forward to the first game. Honestly, it's kind of backwards, it makes no sense. Maybe I too have gone mad. Well, I could definitely recommend this game if you're interested. Just know some of the themes that it will cover and you should be fine. The Xbox version seems to be more expensive for whatever reason, and the PS3 seems cheaper, so suck it, Xbox. Just don't go for the computer version on Origin for obvious reasons, since it was also taken down from the Steam store, unfortunately. Like I said, if you're interested, McGee is making a prequel sequel that will take place around Alice at the age of 7 or 8 inside the asylum, and plans on it coming out next Halloween. So something to look forward to next year for sure. The link is in the description below to check out, where he updates about progress pretty regularly, and it looks like it's going to be a bigger improvement than the last few games. I fear that I too may be going a tad mad from these games, and I may be able to squeeze another game in between, but I plan on checking into a very interesting hotel soon. So go ahead and make sure you tap that subscribe button and smack that bell to know when the next video is out. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again real soon.